Alright guys, this is John, and today we're going to be using full self-driving for a 250-mile trip from Eau Claire, Wisconsin to northern Minnesota. We're going to be using full self-driving for the entire duration of this trip, including to the point of the Supercharger, which is located in a parking ramp in downtown Duluth. So I'm just going to let the cameras roll for the first part of this trip, and then I will be doing check-ins every 50 miles throughout our duration, just to give energy consumption updates. During one attempt to disable the wipers, the screen has completely frozen. So I have no ability to use my screen to report this. It's not updating the map, it's not updating my navigation here. The car does seem to be driving perfectly normally, and if I press the windshield wiper fluid button, I can still operate the windshield wipers. So I'm going to try to disable autopilot really quickly and see if that helps remedy the situation. So I do notice when I push the accelerator, it does slow down and speed up, and I do have full control over steering. The screen has gone blank, so it means that the system is rebooting. And I've never had this happen before, so it'd be interesting to see when it comes back up what it shows, if it saved any of the navigation data that I put in earlier, if I have to reload the route and program the trip. But even without the electronics, other than not having feedback for the speed that I'm driving at, the car is behaving completely normally, like any other normal car would. Good. Now we have the system completely restored. It appears it's completely restored. It looks like it's got the route. It's recalculating my route. I have visualization. Everything's updating. And I am able to enable autopilot with full self-driving, which is, I can tell that by the single blue line on the map here. So I'm going to take a quick look at the trip meter and see if it saved those settings as well. And it looks like it did. It shows distance that we've traveled since I set the trip meter at 37 miles. So everything looks good. So the car can reboot itself during a drive and completely come back online and restore all of its settings. As far as an energy check-in, an update shows that we are currently at a 66% state of charge on the battery, arriving at the Duluth Supercharger with a 10% state of charge, so that's remained relatively unchanged since we began the trip. And if I look at consumption, over the last 30 miles, I'm averaging 326 watt-hours per mile, traveling at a speed of between 60 and 70 miles an hour. We had to slow down for the construction zone for a little bit of it so we could see that that impacted our energy consumption, positively impacted it. The projected range is showing at 141 miles. And we have 107 miles to the Supercharger. So we'll arrive with plenty of battery capacity left to be able to recharge for the remainder of our trip. This will be the third construction zone that I've come upon during this trip, and so we'll see how it does. One thing I've noticed about the car is that it will automatically make a lane change for the construction into the single lane. So that's something that I don't have to worry about. And then it will follow the speed of the vehicle in front of me. I'm going to pay attention here because the road is a little contaminated, so it could be a little slippery going through this turn. Okay, so it completely did that by itself. It did wait a little long for the transition into the left lane. I would have made that transition a little sooner to stay on dry pavement and not enter the snowy part of the road, which is a little more slippery or sketchy. So I'm going to try to let go of the wheel and see how long it goes before it asks me to touch the wheel again. So we'll give it a count here. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. So about 5 seconds. And so it does require driver input a lot more frequently than when it detects road construction and cones. And I would expect that. I mean, that's a safety thing for the car and for driving, to make sure that the driver is paying attention when driving conditions are less than ideal. So one thing I wanted to share coming into Trego, Wisconsin, is that there is a charger here. It's actually a level 2 charger, and the reason I know that is because on the Plugshare app, I can search for these. So superchargers are not always necessary when you're traveling. There are other options to use, and this one is actually one that I've used for just a quick stop. It's level 2, and it charges at 12 kilowatts, which provides close to about 50 miles an hour of range for charging. As you can see, here's my photo that I used to check in the last time I was here. And the way that this charger works is you create an account with the vendor for the charger, and then load some money into that into the account, and then as you charge, it deducts from the balance that you have set up with it. So I'm going to stop at this level 2 charger just for a little bit. I'd like to be at a 10% state of charge when I arrive, and so I think just a few minutes on the charger will help get us there. It's not necessary, but I actually don't like to cut it that close when I'm driving. I like to have a little more margin for range on destination. Right, so here I am at the charger, and we've got everything plugged in and ready to go. That's looking pretty good. I did have to use my adapter for the plug because it is a standard J1772 connector. And the way that this works is at the charger, there's a little QR code at the bottom, and you just scan that code with the app and then hit start charge, and it begins the charge. So we do a quick check-in inside. We see on the screen that we are charging right here, and it's showing 12 kilowatts of charge rate, 48 amps, and we're currently at a 42% state of charge. It does show 4 hours and 30 minutes remaining for the charge, but that's to 100% charge limit. I am only going to sit here for maybe 15 minutes to jump up a few miles, add a few miles of range to it. So that's what I've got going on right now. Check back with you guys when I get on the road. So you can see with that little jump in charge, we went from arriving at a 6% state of charge to about 9% state of charge. It gives us a little more buffer there. It wasn't really necessary to stop and charge. We would have made the trip fine. I've done it before, but I just prefer not to have that low of a residual charge left when I arrive. So, especially on a day like today, the weather outside is 31 degrees, so it's not incredibly cold, but it's not something that I'd want to worry about or struggle about being outside in. So we're back on our route now to the Duluth Supercharger. That'll be our next stop on our way up to northern Minnesota. Remaining distance to the Supercharger is 67 miles. If I look at our range right now, it's projecting 88 miles. So again, plenty of range. We did add some in. If I slow the car down, I would actually be able to increase this number from 9% up to something higher. But I feel like that is a good number, and 70 miles an hour is a decent speed for this leg of the trip. On the time lapse that I just had, I don't know if it picked it up, but I did have one issue that just occurred when I was driving on full self-driving, and that was the car made a lane change from this lane, the right lane, into the left lane, and then when it changed back from the left lane to the right lane, it continued to change into a turn lane, which would have been inappropriate for the road. So I did have to intervene and disengage autopilot to keep us in this lane, and then I re-engaged it. We haven't had any issues since. We'll do a quick check-in here for energy and see how we're doing. So currently at 70 miles an hour, outside air temperature is 31 degrees Fahrenheit. I do have the cabin temperature set at 70 with the seat heater turned on. I did turn that on a few miles ago. And I noticed that our range now is at 56 miles from this point, with 40 miles left in our destination. So still plenty of margin left to get to the Supercharger. My energy consumption right now is averaging over the last 30 miles, 383 watt hours per mile. So if you're wondering how that compares with the vehicle itself and how it's done over the lifetime average, we can look here on the trip meter. I do have a trip meter distance set from the time I purchased the car, and the total distance I've driven this car is 38,949 miles. And over that time, I've used an average of 323 watt hours per mile. And that's with winter and summer driving, all seasons, all driving conditions, city, highway. So that's just an average lifetime for this car. And so when I look at that and compare it, our energy consumption now is a little higher than the average consumption for the car. Coming up on Superior, Wisconsin. So this will be the town right before Duluth, where we will be supercharging. We're 11 miles from our destination, and we're showing a 13% state of charge on the battery. Coming up here will be an interesting series of turns on our navigation. So we'll be making a right-hand turn off this road to get onto a left-hand turn to go over this bypass that goes over the road. So we actually want to be on the other side of the road. The Holiday Inn, where the Supercharger is located, is just visible over there on the other side of the road. So we're going to make this right-hand turn. It stops here at the intersection. There is a yield sign, so it actually should proceed straight through. And it did after a brief stop just to make sure that the intersection is clear. Now we want to be in the left-hand turn lane, and we are there. We've got to stop right here with a left turn. There are two cars on our left side which are just out of camera. They are making a turn, so those won't be a factor for us. And the car is going to creep up into the intersection, make sure that it's safe to turn, and then it makes the turn. So we do have two lanes here. The marking between the lanes is not very clear. There is some road salt on the road, which is probably a little confusing as well. So everything on this part of it went just fine until right here. At this point, we should be in the right-hand lane to make a turn, but we've got a little bit of time, so we'll see if it makes the adjustment. And it's not going to, maybe. It's very interesting. So there are no lane markings on this. This is actually a brick drive road. And it is going to successfully navigate around that car. So I'm actually letting it go on full self-driving here, although this is very awkward. It's definitely not how I would navigate through this part of the drive. And as you can tell, there's not a lot of confidence that it has. It wanted me to interact with the wheel through the turn. So although the car is successful in navigating this in full self-driving, it's really not doing it very smoothly, and I would say marginally safely. So I would actually prefer to drive myself through this, but I do want to test full self-driving through this area and see how well it does. We had a disengagement of the autopilot back there just because I was pulling a little hard on the steering wheel to make sure that it got around some of the parked cars on the right-hand side. It's a four-way stop. It came to a complete stop as appropriate. And our destination is right here. So at this point, it won't know where we want to go from here. So I'll take over and navigate us through the drive. And this little section right here, getting up to the second level of the ramp, is definitely beyond the scope of full self-driving and what it was intended to do. It knows city streets. It does not know private structures like the parking ramp. So I would not expect it to bring me directly up to the supercharger and to stop here for charging. And here we are, 8% state of charge. I'm going to go ahead and get the car plugged in, and we'll sit back and enjoy some charging time. So I just want to show this charging rate here. This is absolutely amazing. We are charging at 544 miles per hour. We are consuming 130 kilowatts at this charger. Supercharger time is complete. Parking is validated and we're ready to go. So we're coming up into the overpass over a mining area. This is very beautiful, very scenic. And this will bring us into Virginia, Minnesota. As far as energy consumption goes, since we left the supercharger, we were at 87% state of charge. And we are currently at 50% state of charge. Shows us arriving at our destination with 35% of the battery remaining. For consumption, it looks like our 30-mile average range consumption has been 349 watt-hours per mile. projected range at this point is 101 miles with 30 miles remaining. So as we can see on the display here, if we move this over, the car does visualize all of the other traffic at this intersection. It can detect a car over here, and it detects two vehicles to our left waiting at the intersection. It also sees oncoming traffic in the far left lanes and the traffic that's in our lane. So how do we do on our trip? Well, let's take a look. We've got 35% state of charge remaining on the battery. And when we look at the trip meter, 248 miles traveled. Our total energy usage was 89 kilowatt hours. This is a 75 kilowatt hour battery, so it definitely required a charge for us to be able to make the full trip. Energy consumption is 358 watt hours per mile. When you look at this trip meter, this is a lifetime trip meter for the car. I've driven 39,000 miles and my average energy consumption is 323. So overall, our energy is 358 versus 323, which is a little higher than what we typically average, but the outside weather is 38, and this was highway driving for pretty much the entire trip, going 65 to 75 miles an hour. Glad you guys could come along in this video with me. I will look forward to doing more videos similar to this to show you the car's performance over time, and we'll check in with you on the next one. All right, have a good one.